Hi, everybody. Bruce Schutter here with the Mental Health Warrior Program podcast, No Surrender. And today, what I want to talk about, I'm going to give you a little glimpse, an inside view into one of my challenges, bipolar disorder. And the reason being, I want to give that inside glimpse for the people that are on the outside. So people that are friends, family, coworkers, things. If you know somebody who's struggling with this, I want to give you some insights so that we can all be on the same playing field and be able to talk openly about this. Now, on the second hand, the second point, the reason I want to talk about bipolar disorder is if you're struggling with it, I want you to know you're not alone. And I want you to know there are things you can do as a mental health warrior to triumph over this challenge each and every day. Because before, now, if you've heard my story before, just bear with me for a few seconds here. But before bipolar disorder, alcoholism, anxiety disorders, all of these fear of emotions combined with those disorders, they led me to where I basically had no control over my life. And each and every day, I was pulled in numerous directions by those challenges. I had surrendered all control, gave up even trying to deal with my emotions, and tried to drink them away. You can obviously tell this is what led me to a very bad place to where essentially I didn't want to be part of this world anymore. Now that is what it can happen when we don't take care of our mental health. And I know I've mentioned that before, but today I want to just give you that insights into bipolar so that we do not let that happen. And I encourage you to become a mental health warrior so that you can gain back that power like I did. Now, what does bipolar mean and what has it meant for me? Well, I've had it for forever. I've had it even as a teenager, as a young kid. I was probably there. I wasn't diagnosed. Okay. I didn't get diagnosed till I was 40. But again, I always struggled and always seemed to be on the emotional ends of the spectrum. So I was always bouncing between extreme highs of everything is great and extreme lows of everything is horrible, the worst ever. That really defines what bipolar is. And we're not going to get into all the scientific pieces, but essentially bipolar means you swing to those opposite ends of the emotional spectrum. So one of the things that I found was I didn't spend equal times in those. So again, it's not one of those areas where you say, well, I was just on top of the world. Oh, now I'm back and I'm feeling depressed, but it balances out because it's a 50-50 split. No, I found a lot of times I spent a large amount of time into depression, pushed me into depression. And I believe that's because, one, it's a tougher emotion to deal with. Obviously, when things are going really well, you're on top of the world, you'll take on any challenge. But when you're depressed, even basic things like going to take a shower can be tough. So you can imagine, put that throughout your day and trying to exist or try to keep moving forward, if you will. I struggled a lot in just trying to keep going because I wanted to live life, but I was a lot of times in depression or on the edges of depression due to bipolar. Now, one of the interesting things too, I want to bring up and let you know some interesting pieces on, and excuse me here, the phone keeps dinging, so we're going to turn that down. Didn't turn that off. Sorry about that. One of the things though with bipolar is it is also not clear cut in that you can actually experience both emotions at the same time. So there are times when I'm elated and completely depressed at the same time. I'm going to let that sink in for a second because there's also times where I can be very elated and just completed a project or just completed maybe a podcast. And not more than 2 minutes later, oh, I'm in depression. I messed up. I did terrible on that podcast. That's my type of thinking that bipolar brings to me. So you can imagine it can get very complicated up there in my head. And for people with bipolar, I can make a little joke about it because it is not something, what I'm trying to say is bipolar is not something that follows the book, the playbook. Now, when we talked and I gave an inside view of anxiety that I struggle with, I felt it was a little clearer because I could almost sum it up and say fear and worry about everything. It's very hard to sum up bipolar disorder, and you can kind of get what I'm saying just from these first examples. So we have the emotional ends of the spectrum. We have us pinging between those emotional ends. Remember, not a lot of middle ground, not where most days they're either depressed or everything's great. The next thing is we have them occurring simultaneously. We have them occurring, and they call it rapid cycling, where you go back and forth throughout the day. And sometimes we also find that it will just send us into depression, or you find depression, because that is one of the tough emotions of the two that it brings up, for no reason. Like I said, when you're pinging back and forth, a lot of time there is no valid reason. So we have a very big plethora of challenges that we need to deal with. Now, at this point, I want to stop and say, I know we're trying to talk about a lot, and you could imagine this is why it's so difficult. This is why bipolar is such a tough mental health disorder to manage, because it has so many facets, so many angles to it, so many things to it. And it affects so many parts of your life then, because you can imagine if you are just going to work and you get hit with those emotional ends of the spectrum, well, that's going to make it even tougher to do your job. So what we're going to do, what I want to let you know at this point before we go any further, is the answer I found is to be a mental health warrior, which is why I created this whole program. Because I found that when you can manage your emotions, and I mean all emotions, and that is the goal. And a goal as a mental health warrior, my goal and your goal too, is to be able to handle the entire emotional spectrum, the spectrum of emotions, we'll call it, where you have the entire bandwidth from the greatest to the worst, because that is what life is defined by. That is what is part of life. We cannot skip through and get the full life experience if we don't embrace all of the emotions. So, one of the goals as a warrior is to embrace and learn to ally with all our emotions. And I bring this up because that is one of the strengths in battling back and being able to triumph over bipolar depression. Because the biggest win I've had is no matter where it sends me and spins me around, or if it sends me from depression to mania, even at the same time, I have tools and I can get comfortable with those emotions, where no longer do I have to seek short-term solutions like running out to drink to hide from things. So I want to put down as this point, here's the first step. Now, we have talked about this, and it's one of the core pieces of being a warrior. It is to learn to respond, not react to life's challenges. Now, you may have heard that before in some of these others. I will bring it up because it's a mindset rule. It is one of the warrior tools that are out there. And mindset rules number 2 is learn to respond, not react to life's challenges. I also put it on the Mental Health Warrior Challenge coin, something we carry with us each and every day in our pocket. And the reason being is this approach, this mindset rule is so powerful. And particularly for me, it is very powerful in dealing with the 3, 4, 5. I keep forgetting because there's so many mental health disorders I struggle with. But that is because that is typically also what happens. Life rarely gives us one challenge at a time, defeat it, move on. Usually we're hit with a lot. So my plan was, as warriors, we're going to be well prepared. And it really works well with bipolar because it also brings a lot of challenges to us. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up at this point, we kind of set the stage a little bit for a little glimpse into what bipolar does. We know it's on the emotional ends of the spectrum. We know it can spin us around between those. One of the things, though, is there are these lesser known or other symptoms and things it brings in. And I just want to bring those up real quick because it is, again, not one of those clear-cut type mental health disorders. And so things like when you're struggling with bipolar, a lot of times your irritability levels are higher. I find I get irritated a little bit faster than a lot of people, which again, obviously could lead to anger. Now, that can certainly happen when you're driving. One little thing sets you off. Next thing, you're in full-blown road rage. Again, don't like to admit it, has happened, but I've learned to respond, not react. So that plays a big role in helping me deal with that symptom. Now, another symptom is we have trouble sleeping. I have trouble sleeping a lot, and that is because of racing thoughts. So we have the irritability. That's another symptom. We have these racing thoughts, which contributes to the inability to sleep and or sometimes even relax. So I'm kind of putting them together on a little umbrella. But what happens a lot of times is I will find my thoughts take off. They start racing. And those thoughts race because of the emotional state I'm in. So if I'm in a mania state, if I'm in everything is great state, they can take off and I can think of 100 things we need to do today. And then if I'm in a depressive state, I can think of 100 things I will never get to or will do wrong or will be wrong. So you can see the challenge there. What happens, I find a lot with people is, especially myself, is these racing thoughts occur when I wake up and it's 2 a.m. And then my head kicks into gear. And I snap my fingers real loud here because that's what happens. It's like, bam, I went from being peacefully asleep. I woke up for whatever reason and my mind started racing. Now, this has also happened during the day when I get involved in a lot of projects and things. I have to be a little careful there because your mind can start racing and taking off, and you may start taking on too many projects or setting unrealistic guidelines or deadlines, things like that. Now, all of these things, again, racing thoughts, inability to sleep, we can use warrior tools. Now, today, I just want to keep focusing on remember to respond, not react. I'm not trying to downplay that we don't need a lot of tools. I'm not trying to say there are not, because the warrior has a wealth of tools and solutions that we can use. But what we want to do is have some core ones that we can use throughout each and every day. And when you learn to respond, not react, you give yourself a little pause to evaluate things, to make a real choice and see if those racing thoughts are telling the truth, and then make a calm answer, or actually do that at night where I see all these things that are going on and I'll say, wait, I can handle all of these because half of these are just normal ones that I'm on top of those projects. So again, you can start to see how powerful this is in helping deal with all of the other symptoms of bipolar. Now, another one is worry and anxiety. Now, again, sometimes it's hard because, again, a lot of these mental health disorders or a lot of mental health challenges, there's a lot of gray area in between them. So I have anxiety disorders and I have a generalized anxiety disorder, but my actual bipolar in putting me in those emotional states at the end of the spectrum and then doing things like racing thoughts or the irritability and the anger, well, it brings up the anxiety levels. So a lot of times it's very hard to tell exactly which challenge is causing it, but increased anxiety, increased worry about things comes along with bipolar. And a lot of times that is what can occur, as I mentioned, when you get swung into it for no reason, but it brings in that worry. Now, one of the things that we're trying to talk about here, one of the ideas is by identifying all of these different issues and symptoms, if you will, that this allows us to have starting points. And this allows us to actually exercise our power as mental health warriors, because then there are specific tools we can stockpile into our arsenal. There are specific approaches we can use to slow the process down, like learning to respond, not react. And all of that will go towards helping you learn to manage and triumph over your bipolar disorder. Because it will, and it has worked for me, because what it has done is it gives me time to process the emotions and then make better choices, and not to basically take at face value what bipolar wants us to think. And I have found that is actually one of the strongest ways to triumph each day over bipolar disorder. Because you can imagine, and I was even looking just now at my notes because I have a list of other lesser known symptoms, and then I go back to the main symptoms. And you can imagine at this point that you're probably a little overwhelmed, and I understand it. And I'm overwhelmed even talking to you about it because there's so many angles and so many areas of bipolar disorder. And that's why it's so tough to get a grasp on in order to triumph over it. But I want to leave you with this last big thought. The biggest thing, everything we mentioned about today, whether it's a lesser known symptom, some of the major symptoms of what is bipolar is defined at, it is all about your emotions. And again, this is exciting. This is powerful because mental health warriors, their core piece of being a warrior is we are going to ally with our emotions. We're going to make friends with them. We're going to learn from them. And we are going to get comfortable with them. Because when you do that, you get to tap into their power. And you can learn to then triumph over any challenge, including bipolar disorder, each and every day. And the reward for this, and this is the best part, then you get the full life experience. You get to not be held back or be afraid or stop a pursuit of something. You can do anything and go after anything because you'll be able to manage your emotions, and that allows you to take any steps you need to do those activities, to follow that pursuit, all along the way, triumphing over each and every challenge. Woo! Now, I know that's a lot, but I want to leave on a very positive message because bipolar disorder took me down and ran my life for 20 years, but it has stopped having that power over me when I became a mental health warrior. So if you are interested in the whole mental health warrior program, I would be negligent if I didn't mention, make sure you go to bruceschutter.com. Type in mental health warrior program in any of the search engines, and you should find your way there to our websites, and you will find a free book. You will find other books that are out there. There's 9 books to help you be fully armed as a mental health warrior, and they will help you in various areas of your life to take care of and build strong mental health. So again, we can triumph over any challenge. You'll see more information about the Mental Health Warrior Challenge coin, and you'll just see more information about other free resources like this podcast and other blog articles and things to keep you going each and every day. Because I'm going to leave this with you, that last statement that I try to close and remember on most podcasts. The power to change your life is within your grasp. The only question is, are you going to say yes? And I know you will. So I look forward to seeing you there and being a mental health warrior with you. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.